I just thought I'd talk to you today a little bit about something to do with some hexagons. Now, not strictly speaking hexagons, certainly not when we finish with them. I am going to start with some hexagons though. If you're like me and you like to collect things when you see them, I'm sure you're a little bit like me in that way, then you may have in your stash some pre-cut hexagons. Now, they may not be this large, they might be only this large, or they might be somewhere in the middle. There's lots of sizes of hexagons. Hexagons we often manage to think about with hand sewing, with the English paper piecing, but I wanted to do something with my hexagons that wasn't English paper piecing or hand sewing because I like my sewing machine. So I've got here a very nice selection of hexagons, and I just am going to cut them in half. By cutting them in half, that makes a different shape for us to use, and I find it's a much more user-friendly or sewing-friendly shape for the sort of thing that I'm wanting to do at the moment anyway. So with the hexagons, they're cut with 6 sides, and the chances are that they've been cut so that there's a straight grain. So when I pull that, that's quite firm, it's not stretching. When I pull from these other angles, you can see that there's quite a bit of stretch in that. So you don't want to be cutting along a stretchy bit, but what we're going to do is cut them in half, and we're going to go from point to point when we cut, but we want the one that's on the straight grain. So the chances are that the 2 straight edges, mind you, it depends which way you turn it, doesn't it? 2 edges will most likely be straight, so we're going to cut down between those 2 straight edges. So I'll just do that, and we're going to be putting their half hexagons together to look something like this. So they're no longer a full hexagon when they're sewn back together again, because we've taken a chunk out of the middle for the seam. But they're a similar sort of shape. So we're going to start off by cutting one of these in half. So I know that this is my straight grain because there's no stretch, and I want to go cut through point to point. So I've got my ruler and cutter here, and I'm just going to lay the ruler so that it goes through the point at both ends. And you can probably cut 4 of these at a time, you don't necessarily have to do 1 at a time, and just cut that in half. And now I have 2 pieces of fabric, and that's just the way I wanted it, because now I'm going to start sewing them together. So when we sew them together, obviously we're going to use a couple of different colours, but we want to basically top and tail them so that this seam here joins up, so that we're going to end up with a very nice straight strip that we can then join together. So like I said, sewing machine friendly. So I've already started sewing some pieces together. So I've done a couple here, so I'm going to do another couple to add to those, just to show you the strip effect, and then I'll show you how to put those together. So when you sew these are slightly less than normal angle. So when you put them together, we're going to lay that over the top, as you would normally, bring right sides together, and you want to have sticking out on the corner there, where that intersects is going to be your 1/4 inch from the edge. So you're going to start sewing right in that little valley there and come all the way along to the edge, making sure that edge is lined up, and it should be coming through the intersection at the other end as well. They should sit pretty much exactly, and I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do that. Now when we're making these strips, we also need to remember as we join them that there's actually 2 strips that make up, if you look at this as a hexagon, even though it's not quite, one lot of seams are going that way and the other is coming in that way. So we need to make a strip this way, and we need to make a mirror image the other way. So you have to remember to do half your shapes one way and half the other if you're going to make a quilt something like that. So now I'm just going to do my regular 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we did cut it on the straight grain, so this edge here is nice and straight, so that when we're joining our long strips together, that will sit nicely. However, this strip side that we're sewing together now is not so firm. It's a little bit stretchy because it's not quite on the actual bias, but it's on a bias, so it's on an angle, which means that it's a little bit stretchy. So just be aware of that when you're sewing. Don't let it stretch itself out of shape. If you have a dual feed, pop that on, or a walking foot, that's always helpful. If not, just be aware and be careful not to stretch it as you sew it. So I'm actually going to come in and sew one from the other strip now. So it's got to face the other way. So I've got this one with that one on top, and now I need this one to go the other direction. So we're going to sew these 2 together this other way, so that where that one's going out at an angle there, this one's coming at an angle towards you, so that you can see that there is a difference It's slightly confusing, but you will get into the rhythm of it as you do it. And I would suggest doing the whole row the same way, not chopping and changing a little bit like I am, because that's just more confusing. So again, that little intersection should be where the 1/4 inch is, and I'm going to come along that seam. I'm not stretching the seam. And there I have a couple of those. I'm going to add to the couple that I already have to make myself a longer strip. So same thing, we come back to the one that we were going to liken it to, which will be this one. As seams that way, we want to match that line up there, so that one's going to go over there. So you can chain piece the same as we do with any sort of similar piecing and things, but I'm just showing you in a small amount this time, and we'll do the same with this one here. So I'll go ahead and do those and come back to you and show you what to do next. And I've attached my pieces together, so I've got 2 of these strips that are the same length as the piece I've done. You may want, of course, to make a longer strip if you're making a quilt. However, I'm just making a short strip today. So I want to press the seams in a row all one way, just like we would do if we were doing squares or blocks or something like that, because we're going to be able to nestle these seams. Even though they're on a funny angle, they'll nestle beautifully. So those seams are all going that way on that piece, and then on this piece I want them to go the opposite way, so I'm going to turn that around and start at this end and press from here. And again, just let that flip over and flip over and press, so that that's sitting nice and straight as well. So now we've got 2 strips here that are looking pretty good, and these are going to go up against here, so we want to make sure that we join them the right way around now. So because we've got the long and we've got the short, so you want to make sure that that's the right way. So what I find is that I like to start at the sort of bigger end for no good reason. The other end is always the opposite end, so as in it comes in, this one goes up. So now I'm going to join those 2 together. So because I've pressed my seams in opposite directions, oh, I will have when I turn it round, and that's the beauty of it, you can just turn that row around. I now can nestle those seams when I get to them. So I'm going to start at the end and nestle. I can feel them, or if you want to put pins or clips in, up to you. And then all the way along they will nestle together nicely, so that we get a nice point at that join. So I'll go ahead and join my strip together. Keep an eye on those joins, they're together. So I've joined my 2 rows together there, which is really nice, and I haven't pressed that seam yet. I'm going to join it now to this other lot here, because we can press those seams also all in one direction when I finish that. So now I'm going to go ahead and join this up again. Nestle your seams, everything should match nicely, and I'll come back and show you when I'm pressing it. So kind of fun to be working with some different shapes. So I've got all that piece together now. That's looking kind of fun. It's kind of scrappy, so a great way of using up bits and pieces if you're going to be cutting your own fabrics. Also, you can make a nice pat look quite scrappy by mixing them around. So I've already started pressing my seams one way, so I'm going to continue on with that. My ironing board's not very big here. So I'm just going to press them over to one side. So everything should sit really nicely, because these hexagons are quite a nice shape to work with. So as long as you just don't stretch those seams when you're stitching them, everything sits really nicely. Let's come up here and finish the split. I always like to press from the right side if I can. That bit in there, and there we have it. So that half shape is some sort of a trapezium or trapezoid, or one of those names that they use for that shape that's got the two parallel sides and the two angled sides. They're not always necessarily the same angle, I believe, in a shape like that, but these ones are. So that angle is looking pretty good. A nice big quilt like that would look fabulous. So that angle is actually a 60-degree angle. So I'll just quickly show you how you might achieve that if you're going to use your own fabrics. Now you might cut out lots of hexagons. There's lots of templates on the market. There's small ones, there's large ones, there's some in between. That's actually a paper, so that you could use that as a shape. So you can cut your own hexagons out, or you might just have some strips and you want to do something like that. Because it is no longer a hexagon in actual fact, you can make something that could be slightly longer in shape, more like a lozenge type shape and things. So I'll just show you how you can achieve that 60-degree angle. So as well as there being hexagon templates that you can use, there's also 60-degree angle rulers used for various different forms of patchwork that will give you that shape. So you could lay that so that your straight edge is along a strip of fabric, and you'd cut your 60 degrees at that end, and then you would work out how long you want it between, and you'd cut it at the other end. If you don't have any of those things, you may have a ruler that has got some angled markings on it. So this ruler here has got 3 markings on it. This one here is a 60-degree angle line, 60 degrees from this edge here. This one is a 45 degrees, which is the average half square triangle sort of shape. And this one is at 30 degrees if you were after just a smaller angle. But we want the 60-degree angle today. As I said, many rulers have that, not all, but a lot of them do. So what I'm going to do is lay a strip of fabric here along matching the lines on my board as a guide. And this 60-degree line I'm going to lay along one of the other lines, so that when I lay that over the fabric, that's going to give me, I'm not sure if you can, hopefully you can see that, I'm lining that 60-degree line up with a line on my board, so that where it goes over the fabric here, that's actually going to be at 60 degrees. So I can actually cut that at that 60 degrees, and that is the same angle as we've just been sewing on the half of the hexagon. Now I can do the other end of the shape as well. This is where I would want to decide so that all my shapes were the same length, so that we get this nice matching thing going on. I would need to just work out how long I want in between, and work out where I can position that on my board to make that work for me. So I'm actually just going to cut this without measuring particularly, because it's just to show you how to cut. So we've cut one end, and again my 60-degree line lined up with one of the lines on the board, because the fabric's lined up with the horizontal lines, and I'm going to cut through there. And as you can see, I've got a very nice shape that gives a very good idea of being half a hexagon or something like it. So that's how you can make your own shapes. If you've got lots of scraps, you might have strips. They can be any variety of widths and things, but if you were making something like this, I suggest that you have work with a similar size, so that you can make everything match nicely for the lengths and things. So that's that. So I have also had a little play with some smaller hexagons. These are kind of so much fun. I had a lot of these left over from some projects, and I've put together some of the little shapes, and it looks so cute when they're little and even bright like that. So exactly the same thing, I cut these hexagons in half and sewed them together just the same way as I've been showing you on the larger ones, and it makes a really fun, scrappy looking little piece of fabric, or maybe a larger piece because you've done more, and you can turn that into anything you like. Now there's one more thing to show you. I thought we'd just talk about the edges, because now we've got this wonderful edge which isn't particularly what we're used to if we're making a quilt. So I'll just talk about these edges and the cutting of them. So I've got a longer ruler here. You may want to do it in segments, you may want to fold it over and do it a different way. There's lots of different things you can do. However, I'm going to line up my edge of my fabric strip here on the board with the markings on the board. And it's all going to sit nice and flat, because I'm going to move all my clutter out of the way. And that should be sitting straight at both edges. And so now I want to just trim off. So we can pretty much go through from point to point, or we can go up a touch, because that's going to come down. But I would probably come through at point to point on that edge and just trim those little bits off. It's not a lot of fabric that we're losing there, so I wouldn't be worrying too much about just trimming off some little bits like that. And then we've got a really nice straight edge that we can put a border on or a binding or whatever it is that we want to do with it. And obviously you do the same thing on the other edge. So line up your fabric with the board. It should be sitting tight. Straight there. It's looking pretty good. And then we're going to just bring this ruler so that it cuts through on those little valleys so that we've got the fabric sitting nicely, so we get a nice straight edge there. And that's it, done. And the same thing of course would apply if you're wanting straight edges on your small piece. You would just trim those little points off. So that's looking fantastic. Even on its own, that would make a nice cushion top if you've just got a smaller amount of shapes that you want to use up. Whatever it is that you want to do, I'm sure you'll think of something wonderful to do with some of those hexagons that are probably sitting in your stash, just like mine were, lurking. So that was it for this time. Thank you.